All right, let's get into it. You want this story to hit like a real American, sitting on the porch with a cold drink, talking straight from the gut. So here's how I'd tell it. If you were right there with me, just you and me and a little dirt under our nails. You ever watch someone try to settle a score that's older than the paint on their walls, but they dress it up like it's about rules or community spirit? Yeah, pull up a chair because this one's got everything. A power-hungry HOA queen, a rigged system, an innocent family garden, and a final showdown. So sweet folks are still talking about it every time they walk their dogs past the Callaway place. Picture this. The overhead projectors humming away in the clubhouse, casting a crooked patch of light on a sad beige wall. There's Mark Calloway's steady hand standing up front with his little garden shed plans, nothing fancy, just some cedar siding and a charcoal roof tucked out of sight, all neat and proper like every neighborly thing he's ever done. Mark isn't just a stickler, he's a craftsman, the kind who measures twice and then again just to be sure. The man's lived on his spread since before the Summit Creek HOA even had a name. He's not technically under their thumb, but out of courtesy and maybe habit, he goes in and tries to play nice. 3 of the 5 committee members. They're nodding along, thinking about dinner, but up at the head of the table here, she comes Brenda Holloway. You ever see hair so stiff it might break a comb? That's Brenda, President for Life, Queen Bee, with a binder thicker than the Sunday paper and a look that could cut steel. And let's be honest, she wasn't interested in sheds. Not that night. Mark's halfway through explaining his materials when Brenda interrupts, smooth as an oil spill, all polite venom. I believe we have a more pressing architectural matter. She lets the words hang, that lawyer smile never reaching her eyes. Your garden, she purrs, and the unapproved fence. Now let me back up a sec. Mark's garden was his family's labor of love, set at the edge of his own land with a dinky 2-foot fence just to keep out the rabbits, not the neighbors. But Brenda, she's spinning this into a federal case. That's when you could feel the room shift. Folks started whispering this wasn't on the agenda. Mark kept his cool, pointing out that the fence is barely a border, nowhere near the kind of structure that needs permission. But Brenda, she's got a taste for drama. That's a matter of interpretation, she says, rolling out some bylaw about view corridors and making a show of her power. You know that feeling when you realize someone's using the rule book, not for order, but as a weapon. That's the game now. Mark, being Mark, asks her to cite the actual bylaw, throws her off for a split second, but she recovers, waves her hand, and pretty much says, you can't just do what you want. And just like that, his shed is forgotten, and he's suddenly the main event. This was never about a fence. It was about putting Mark in his place. Now, Mark's the kind of guy who believes in blueprints, systems evidence. His whole life, his business, his family built on clarity and order. His wife, Sarah, a landscape designer with a heart as big as her backyard, and their daughter, Lily, who could spot a weed from a mile away. That garden. It was their Saturday project, their own piece of heaven, tucked right where their land met the community's wild green belt. They'd tilled and planted, painted a sign, the Callaway Patch. For Mark, that property line wasn't a suggestion. It was the law drawn in ink at the county assessor's office. But to Brenda, boundaries were just another thing to move around if it suited her. After Brenda's little ambush, Mark hoped it'd blow over. Wishful thinking. A week later, he gets a courtesy notice email, one of those bureaucratic masterpieces that's friendly on top but loaded underneath. They're accusing him of putting up a fence and a garden believed to be on HOA common property within the Sacred View corridor. He's told to rip it all out within a week or face an official violation. Mark double-checks his survey, his land, no question. He responds, attaches his proof, and politely points out their mistake. Sarah reads over his shoulder, worry in her voice. Are you sure this is the way to handle it? Maybe we just move the fence, keep the peace. Mark shakes his head. It's about principle. He figures logic will win the day. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. 8 days later, there's a knock at the door, certified mail official letterhead. Brenda's gone from passive-aggressive to just plain aggressive. They're fining him, threatening a lien, summoning him to a board hearing, all based on the same bogus claim. Mark feels that cold anger, the kind you get when you realize you're not just up against a mistake, but a machine built to grind you down. Sarah wants to avoid lawyers, so Mark tries to reason with Keystone Management, the HOA's property manager. He meets a nervous young guy named David who basically shrugs and says, "My hands are tied." Brenda calls the shots. Mark asks to see Brenda, but surprise, she refuses to meet with any homeowner facing a violation. Fairness for everyone, she claims. Yeah, that happened. Weeks go by, daily fines pile up. The hearing's set. Brenda starts leaning on anyone who sides with Mark, even sweet old Mrs. Gable down the street, slapping her with violation notices for a single patch of brown grass and an oil stain on her driveway. $50 a day for a widow living on Social Security. Mark's fury hits a boil. This isn't HOA business anymore. It's straight up bullying. Time for a twist. Mark calls George Maxwell, retired county clerk friend and paper trail bloodhound. Over coffee, George shows him how to dig deeper. Turns out all those redacted meeting minutes, hidden budgets, hush-hush landscaping contracts trace back to Brenda's own brother-in-law raking in HOA funds for beautification. And the best part, that 6-foot strip of land everyone's fighting over, it's not even HOA property. It's a county utility easement signed away decades before the HOA existed. The smoking gun. Brenda sees the walls closing in, so she tries to shortcut due process calls in her lawyer, cancels the public hearing, and goes straight for a private board vote to slap a lien on Mark's house. She even tries to buy him off drops all fines if he'll sign a non-disclosure and keep his mouth shut. He thinks of Sarah, of Mrs. Gable, and tears of all the folks who don't have the guts or the evidence to stand up. And right then, Mark decides not today. The night of the annual meeting, the clubhouse is packed, folks buzzing, everyone waiting for the fireworks. Mark's not there for a fight, he's there for the truth. He lays out the evidence packets for everyone, shows them the plat map, the deed of easement, the hidden contracts. He tells them how Brenda weaponized the bylaws for her own gain, punished dissent, funneled money to family. The room erupts, shouts for audits, demands for resignations. Even the management company jumps in, desperate to save their own skins. The board gets censured and audits launched. Brenda is finished, her empire gone in under 5 minutes. Afterwards, Mark and his little crew slip out the cool night air feeling like freedom. Mrs. Gable hugs him, tears running down her cheeks. "You gave me my voice back," she whispers. In the weeks that follow, the community votes. Brenda and her cronies out the audit uncovers years of dirty deals, and the HOA finally gets the overhaul it's needed forever. Brenda skips town. Mark helps the new board rewrite the rules. More transparency, fair appeals, actual checks and balances. And just when you think it's over, Sarah finds an old file. Turns out Brenda lost the original clubhouse design contract to Mark's firm a decade ago. All those years, all that spite, it wasn't about gardens or view corridors. It was a grudge, plain and simple, dressed up as policy. Mark just shakes his head, looking out at his peaceful garden, and finally gets it. The worst structures aren't built out of bricks or bylaws. They're built out of pride and resentment. And if you don't tear them down one day, they'll come after everything you love. So let me ask you, what's the line between standing up for what's right and just letting things go for the sake of peace? Ever been pushed so far you had to fight back? Drop a comment. Tell me where you stand and if you've ever dealt with a bully hiding behind a clipboard and a rule book. Justice only works if regular folks speak up, so go ahead. Let's hear your story.